Continuing in the workplace manual, right where we left off last week. And just a quick little refresher of what we did last week. And this is also important to do if you are teaching a class in the workplace, to always review. There's absolutely nothing with reviewing what you taught previously to make sure your students remember what you have taught. All right, so we went over values and character. And then on page 11, I wanted to refresh a couple of things here. So it went over the importance of moral values to character and how they relate to character. So the first sentence says, one of the key factors that distinguish character from personality is called moral values or principles. Moral values clearly separate right from wrong, and they are the foundation to character. And that is a very important aspect to remember, because moral values, they govern the way people think and behave. And in close to the middle of the paragraph, it says moral principles are considered universal. So meaning that everyone can agree that this is something that we should do in society, something that is something that should be common, I should say, because these days in society, what should be common is not so common these days after all. So then we went over the three basic categories of morality, which was behavior and attitude towards all life, behavior and attitude towards possessions and property, and behavior and attitude towards the environment. And it says having morals is an important way to define your character. Moral values set boundaries to help an individual demonstrate appropriate behavior towards self and others. And we'll also go into more of this in this class, as well as why it's important to have values, and when a person doesn't have values, what can occur to that individual as well. All right, so that's it for a quick review. So we did finish procedure 5. Page 11 did finish off procedure 5. So let's turn to page 4, and we're going to read procedure 6, and this is an activity. And like I said last class, I don't think anyone's too old to have an activity in their class, because it reinforces what has been taught, and it also makes sure that all of your students understand what you have taught as well too, and for you to know what you have to go back over and express more to them as well. So it says activity. Divide the class into groups. Assign a writer and a spokesperson for each group. Have the writers for each group draw 2 columns on their papers. Head 1 column, moral behavior in the workplace, and the other column, immoral behavior in the workplace. Instruct the groups to brainstorm examples for each column. Remind them that examples involving their immediate workplace should not be used. And this is like we covered in last class. You shouldn't use immediate workplace examples, because we do not want to single anyone out or have anyone feeling uncomfortable with being, oh, well, I was the one that made that mistake, so they must be talking about me. You never want to do that, because as we covered before, everyone makes mistakes. What you have to do after is learn from that mistake and grow from it. Allow groups to share their findings with the class. Have a general discussion about the atmosphere in the work environment when people behave immorally towards each other. All right, and a quick example, we wanted to show a quick example of that on this screen here. And so we have our 2 columns, and we have on one column, we have moral behavior in the workplace, and in the next column, we have immoral behavior in the workplace. And you can see the examples that we have under the first column: respect for others, making sure the work area is safe, treating others with kindness, pointing out positive things in others, offering help even if it isn't your job. And on the immoral behavior in the workplace, we have sexual harassment, conflicts between coworkers, theft, disrespect, remarks about others, and unwilling to help out when help is needed. All right, and so each workplace will have different answers depending on what the students have grasped and how they can explain it. And this can be taken and made into a chart and hung up in the office as well that you're working in, but it goes to show how immoral behavior benefits the workplace, and you could also show how immoral behavior will take away from the workplace as well. So going on into the procedure, it says some of the answers was sexual harassment, conflicts between coworkers, theft, and disrespect like we had in the picture. And then you could ask your class, what is the atmosphere like when people behave morally towards others? And this will open up a discussion that shows when people behave morally, how the workplace benefits. All right, so some of the answers was respect, safe, and kind. And in which environment would they rather work? And I probably could tell you for sure they would want to work in an environment where they do feel safe, they are heard, they are respected, because at the end of the day, that is what everybody wants to work with. Work with people who understand them or listen to them, even if the person does not understand them. They respect that that individual has their own opinion as well. All right, so this would be a really nice activity to see where your students are at and to expound on different things that we have covered as well. So let's jump down to procedure 7. All right, so this would be after the activity and after you make sure that your students understand what has been said. And I keep reinforcing that because that is really important, to not just go through the books for teaching wise. You have to make sure that the students are heard and that they feel comfortable expressing, well, I don't quite understand this point. Can you expound on that? Because that is quite okay. So it says, tell students that a person's character becomes evident by the moral choices they make. People make both positive and negative choices. So character is a combination of both positive and negative traits. So it's beginning the awareness of what traits an individual has so they can work on the negative traits and accentuate the positive traits that they have. Review with students the list of both positive and negative character traits found on page 12 to 13 and 16 through 17. Negative traits such as irresponsibility and disrespect can negatively affect a workplace. In contrast, positive traits such as honesty and respect support moral principles and can make the work environment a positive and productive place. Discuss the steps to help you develop positive character traits on page 14 and the steps to help you eliminate negative character traits on page 18. So this is a pretty big procedure. So it goes from page 12 through 18. And just how it says here, you want to help them develop positive character traits while eliminating, but not singling out, the negative character traits. So each individual knows, okay, I need to work on this aspect. So let's turn over to page 12. All right, and something I also want to mention from the procedure before that, where it says a person's character becomes evident by the moral choices they make. And it becomes evident, meaning it becomes clear that they manifest a positive character over time as they continue and practice these things. And just for a reinforcement, you could always go back to page 9 of this book and read the definition of character as well. So you could link the first 2 sentences to page 9. What is the definition of character? And it says here, character is the combination of morals and beliefs that dictate how we treat others, our environment, and ourselves. So as that becomes clear to an individual, you see their perspective change, their values change, and overall, the individual changes themselves. All right, so now let's go to page 12. So we're talking about the positive side of character. And before we get into the page here, I want to cover a couple facts where we talk about the workplace environment can be less than peaceful. We have people who come from different walks of life, who think differently, and when you put them all in one place without the peaceful solution, you can just guess exactly what goes on. If one individual does not respect another's individual, what occurs? Arguing, right? Their opinions are not heard, and the person doesn't feel safe in that work environment, or they don't feel that they can grow in that work environment. All right, so in the workplace, we have teasing, bullying, and also discrimination issues. So I looked up what are the other issues that we have commonly in the workplace. And sadly, they did use the word commonly because it is something that occurs on a daily basis. And they said interpersonal conflict between either two individuals or more, communication problems, gossip, bullying, harassment, discrimination, low motivation and job satisfaction, performance issues, and poor job fit. And all of these are issues that occur in the workplace that take away from the productivity of working. So people tend to think that violence ends in schools or in rough communities, that it's not in the workplace, but we know from articles that this is definitely wrong. All right, so I wanted to bring some statistics on the workplace. So it said around 2 million US workers experience workplace violence each year. And that number is huge. 2 million people experience workplace violence each year. Workplace assaults result in $101 billion in loss annually. So that takes away from the company because they have to not only find a way to help the individual, but also to put money into making sure that that never occurs again. And 27% of all mass shootings have occurred in the workplace. And in the year 2019, 12% of workers said they felt unsafe in their workplace. So that's about 1 in 7 people said they felt unsafe in their workplace. In 2006 to 2010, 501 people were killed nationwide in the workplace each year. And if you add that up from 2006 to 2010, that does become a lot of people. 1 is too many at this place. And this is why the PSCEP solution would come in and help the workplace to avoid situations like this. So there was an article for an example that it said deadly shooting inside the public works facility in Baltimore, Maryland. An argument ended in murder. So we go back to that interpersonal conflicts that we have commonly in the workplace. And then we had a chef in a restaurant was murdered, stabbed to death by a co-worker. They got into an argument and he grabbed the knife and stabbed the chef in the back, and the chef did die. So workplace violence has gotten so bad or so common, as they say, that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, an organization that makes sure the workplace is safe, whereas you would think each company would take that into effect to make sure that the workers are safe, but it's gotten so bad nationwide that an organization had to be formed to insert rules and guidelines for each workplace for things like this to not occur. But they have been working on improving the environment for healthcare and social services departments in dealing with violence in the workplace. And if you go into the statistics more, you can see that healthcare and social services departments are the ones that have one of the top violence ratios, sadly. All right, so now that we've gone over all these statistics and articles, let's jump into page 12. The positive side of character. So remember all those statistics and articles while we're going over this page, and think of ways that if the PSCEP solution was implemented, how that could have been avoided. So the first paragraph, it says, your character is made up of different qualities. They are called character traits. Character traits can either be positive or negative based upon your values, what you have been taught, your choices, and your experiences. And remember, we want to link these first 3 sentences back to page 10, where it goes over what is a value and what is a value system. So our values are the principles or qualities we consider to be important or worthwhile. In our value system, the sum of our values is called our value system. Our value system is the means by which we rank our priorities, prioritize the things that are important to us. So if a person values money over everything else, they will make sure everything in their power that they have that value over anything else. And as we covered in last class, it varies from person to person, whether that person values family, sports, hobbies, and it all goes according to what they deem important. And with each person, as with character traits, we are all unique individuals. It's the same thing for values. What I may value as important, the person next to me might not deem it as important to them, and that's okay. But the bottom line is, it is important to establish what an individual's values are, because that in turn guides what direction they take or what choices they make, whether those are positive or negative. They heavily depend on the values of that individual. So how we prioritize our values is the basis by which our decisions are made. If a person values education, they will try everything in their power to have a proper education. All right, so the key to having moral character is to develop positive character traits. They go hand in hand. Moral character, positive character traits. Immoral character, negative character traits. When you demonstrate these traits on a consistent basis, you will be known as a person of integrity. And quick pop quiz for all of us who have been going through the books. That phrase, you will be known as a person of integrity. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that? You will be known as a person of integrity. What do you think of? You can shout out the answer. What do you think it is? It begins with an R. I'm sure you all know the answer. I see your face. What is the answer? Yes, so it's reputation. So you will be known as a person of integrity. Remember, the definition for reputation is when a person hears your name, the first thing that pops in their head, that is a person's reputation. When you hear an individual's name, oh, that person, she seems nice, but I wouldn't trust her. That is what reputation is. And with the PSCEP solution, you will be known as a person of integrity. That is what we are all striving to be teachers of and have our students remember as well, to have a reputation known as a person of integrity. So people who have moral character show by their actions and attitudes that they care about themselves, others, and the environment. So remember, it goes right back to the moral values that we covered on page 11. So today, with so much emphasis placed on being popular, we find that the work environment is not exempt from this influence. And remember, influences are a very powerful thing. And employers focus on productivity. I don't think they really care about which one of my employees are most popular. The employees might, but when it comes to the end of the day, employers value productivity, positive productivity. However, it is important to note that most employers put greater emphasis on productivity rather than popularity. Therefore, striving to be a diligent, responsible, dependable, and trustworthy employee will go a long way in securing job stability over another who appears to be everyone's friend and confidant. And you can explain to your students, even though these words might seem big or a big task, diligent, responsible, dependable, trustworthy, once you begin to learn the PSCEP solutions and you are aware of not only your thoughts, but your actions, these things do begin to come naturally. You think before you speak, or before you go somewhere, you remember what you have to do. And these things come naturally over time through practice. In addition, becoming a person of integrity is a valuable asset not only in your workplace, but also in your personal life. Developing positive character traits will benefit your entire life. And this goes to emphasize that the peaceful solution doesn't just help in one area of your life, but it helps in all aspects of your life. Knowing that you have the ability to control your thoughts and actions is not only reassuring, but also rewarding in many ways. People who have moral character care about themselves and others. Their actions and attitudes demonstrate this point consistently in their interactions and relationships. So how you behave in the workplace also becomes an aspect in your life, whether you take it home or if for individuals who are still in school, you take it everywhere you go. It goes straight back to you will be known as a person of integrity. That reputation will precede you. Right? So when it says care about themselves and others means showing compassion and empathy. Remember in the first week that we taught, we went over the emotional intelligence, being aware of not only your emotions, but the emotions of those around you and acting accordingly to that. So just the reference, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand both your own emotions and the emotions of those around you. And the signs of having emotional intelligence, or I would call it the peaceful solution, is being able to accept criticism and responsibility, being able to move on after making a mistake, being able to say no when you need to, being able to share your feelings with others, being able to solve problems in ways that work for everyone, and having empathy for others, having great listening skills, knowing why you do the things you do and being sure in the things you do as well, and not being judgmental of others. Right, so with these traits, or with these this list in mind, let's go down to positive character traits. And when we look at these positive character traits in this manual, it's emphasis in the workplace. So every time you read one of these, think of how it can be used and benefit the workplace. So become familiar with these words that describe moral character traits and strive to make them part of your character. So we have educated, getting all the facts and making sure they are correct before making a decision. For example, when you hear about a new product on the market, you do research and check testing and safety records to see if it will benefit your customers before you begin selling it. So with being educated in the workplace, we need academics in the workplace, for example, algebra, geometry. I also wanted to put being educated goes well beyond this as well. Yes, it's important to have an education because academics are important to the workplace, but also having the ability to make sound judgment in situations as well. And in the workplace, that is very important. Being educated of the people around you, being educated in the things that you do on a daily basis so you can make a decision that not only benefits you, the people around you, but the company that you work for or the company that you have. And that is why we always mention being educated first, because it takes an educated person to want to learn the peaceful solution or to improve their lives. So now we're going to go down to respect. Respect means to value others as important as yourself and to allow that to show through your actions and attitudes. And each of these definitions you're going to want to highlight because these are the definitions for each of these positive character traits. And it says, for example, you address everyone with a polite greeting when you walk into the building or onto the job site. And when I read this, I had to laugh because even from when I was young, and I remember I mentioned this when we were teaching the parenting manual, my parents always used to reinforce in me that whenever you walk into a room, you greet and you say hello, whether you want to or you don't. And that is an important part of being respectful because it not only shows that you acknowledge the people who are in that room, but you're also saying, I'm thankful that you are here. You know, that greeting shows acknowledgement to another individual. And sometimes that one word, morning, hello, makes a person's day being acknowledged as an individual who rolled out of bed, got dressed, and came to work. It's that acknowledgement of, I am thankful that you are here, morning. So it's not just in words, but in actions as well. Body language, with respect, it goes deeply into self-respect and taking care of yourself as an individual, because it shows when a person respects themselves in the ways that they respect themselves. If they shower before they come to work, if they brush their teeth to come to work. And people can tell if a person has not done that before. So with respect, and we'll go deeply more into respect in our later chapters, we see how respect is so important in the workplace. And when we look around in society, we see how just the character trait of respect is greatly lacking, with whether it's different news articles or if we're in the workplace or different things we hear about the workplace. If respect was implemented in there, so many problems that we have on society on a whole would be solved. So let's jump over to page 13. We have patient, demonstrating self-control and remaining calm through setbacks. And as an individual in the workplace, this is very important. With time schedules, things don't always go our way, whether a deadline is coming up and you know you're running out of time, but you still have the patience to work with the people next to you. You still have that respect for the people next to you as well. It says, for example, you need to speak with your supervisor concerning an important matter, but every time you try to speak to him, his phone rings. Although you feel frustrated, you patiently wait until he has time. And with patience and with being educated and respectful, you know in a way how to, if it's an emergency, how to get that supervisor's attention to let them know what's going on if it's an emergency, and you see that you don't just interrupt the individual. So with patience, respect, and being educated, you see how all of those interloop, how it can help in the workplace. So now we have honest and trustworthy, being fair, sincere, and straightforward. For example, you accidentally knocked some fuses off of the inventory shelf and broke a fuse. No one saw you, but you tell your supervisor anyway. And this reminded me of a quote that I always reference back to in the PSCEP solution. The true test of character is what you do when no one is looking. Even though no one might know that you are the one that broke the fuse, you still are honest and have the trustworthy character trait to come forward and say, I did this on this. It was an accident, but I still did it. And this is important in the workplace because it lets your supervisors know what kind of individual you are. Your true test of character is what you do when no one is looking, or when you think no one is looking, because these days, someone is always looking, especially in the workplace. And it's always a great sign for the employers and the employee to have that trust and trustworthy with each other, because it builds a bond like no other. So to continue on, I want to turn it over to our next teacher, but I also want to say I also had the privilege of teaching all this month. And this was our last week, which flew by so fast, but we will continue in the workplace manual, and thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Hello, everyone. We're going to continue on with the positive character traits. And the next one is humble. And what that means is it's not being proud or arrogant. And it says a humble person will not argue, dispute, nor disobey set rules. For example, you are supposed to check in with the foreman when you arrive at the job site. Even though you have to walk halfway across the site to find him, you do it anyway. And one of the things that you really want to stress in your class is the importance of rules, because that's the one thing that your team members or your employees are going to buck up against, and that's what they're going to give you the hardest time with. We have to make sure that they understand rules are there for a purpose. Not everybody will like the rules, but they're there for a purpose. And it's most of the time for the safety of others, or so that the business can flow equally. Because if one person is out, the others have to know what the rules are for that particular area so that it all flows. So humble is a really great attribute or character trait. The next one is thankful. Be conscious of the benefits that you have received. Thankful people find joy in what they have, instead of worrying or being upset about what they don't have. For example, you didn't get the promotion you wanted, but you're thankful to still have a job. If you can teach everybody to start looking at the positive instead of the negative, it's going to help them to build this character trait within themselves. There is something to do. There is always something to be thankful for every day. It could be a lot worse than it is. And as teachers in training, start getting your students to looking at, they give you something negative, turn it around into something positive. Try to find that positive in every situation, and that's going to help them to grow and learn to be thankful for the situation in front of them. The next positive character trait is forgiving. To refrain from holding anger or resentment towards someone who has wronged you. For example, your coworker gossiped about you. You are certain that the negative information she has told others caused you to lose your promotion. You decide to forgive her because holding a grudge would affect not only your professional life, but your personal life as well. And that's really a great point that's brought out in this manual, because you can go into a workplace and you know this is how I'm supposed to act when I'm here. But both lives, the work life and the home life, are eventually going to mix in with each other. They're going to mix in because you can't separate yourself 100%. And these are things that we want to remember. When we hold a grudge, it only hurts the person that's holding that grudge. It's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And that was an example for those of you that are familiar with it in the self-control manual on page 76. It's important to forgive, because if we don't know how to forgive, it's going to eat within us, and it's going to eat within that positive character that we're trying to build within our life. The next one is steadfast and persistent. You are determined not to give up or change what you have set out to accomplish. For example, you're determined to improve your character, and that's one of the reasons we're all here today, to help others improve their character. You refuse to become involved in gossip and encourage others not to take part in this harmful behavior. One of the things I want to mention right now is when you're in the workplace, or when you're teaching your students within the workplace, you want to really enhance that positive and everything, and you want to try to get them to always look at that positive, to turn it around. And you have this situation, but let's look at it from this point of view. If you can get someone to step into somebody else's shoes, then you're helping them to understand what that other person is feeling. That's something that's really difficult, especially when you're involved in different cultures and everything, like we were where I used to work. We had cultures, like I've shared before, from all over the world. And to totally understand what someone's feeling, unless you know their entire background or their culture, you don't know what they're going through or what they're experiencing. The teacher prior to us talked about, you put your deodorant on and you do what you need to do before you go to work. There are cultures out there that don't know what deodorant is. And when they come to work, all you smell is that body odor on the person. And when you're dealing with the public, that's something that is hard to deal with. So as supervisors and as teachers, you help the people that you're teaching, the managers and everything, how to introduce hygiene without offending. And that's one of the most difficult things that we had to experience where I used to work, in trying to get other people to understand it's important to use these things. Self-control. Not yielding to impulsive thoughts or actions. For example, your coworker was very rude to you. Although you were upset, you realized that confronting him when you were angry could only make the situation worse. You waited until you calmed down and then dealt with the situation appropriately. One of the things that we want to do is we want to avoid impulsive, spontaneous behavior, because all that does is heat up a situation. And each one of us probably can relate to a moment in our life when that has occurred. Choose respect no matter what's going on. And in this example, it says, it's better to wait till you calm down before you continue on, because all you're going to do is make the matter more flamed. So these are things that we really want to look at with ourselves when we're teaching this class, because everyone has a past, and we don't know what that past is, but it's going to affect their daily lives at work. So we have to take and put on that empathy and that compassion that is within our workplaces as well. Considerate. Having regard for another's feelings. For example, you see a coworker with her hands full trying to open the door to her office. The great thing to do is you offer her help. That's having empathy. I think I skipped one. Compassion. Let's jump back one to compassion. To care about the needs of others. For example, you hear a couple of workers making racial slurs toward another worker. You point out to them that it's not appropriate, and you notify the supervisor immediately. Now, one of the things that you can stress when you're teaching that class is, why is something like that important? Because that can move on to harassment. And you want everyone to work in an environment that is comfortable, that makes them feel safe, that makes them feel loved and cared for. So you have to notify the supervisor immediately, because most businesses are going to have steps that have to be followed to stop any kind of harassment, whether it's sexual, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, or anything like that. They have steps in place. There was an incident when I first started working at the place I just retired from, where somebody was giving me a hard time because of my faith. And my boss found out about it, and her immediate comment was, they're done. I'm terminating them. Well, they'd already given their notice, so I said, no, just let them work out their notice. I'll just avoid that person. But that's something that we have to stress when we're trying to teach this, to take these things seriously, because it makes the workplace a very uncomfortable area to work in. So we have to have compassion. We have to be considerate. And the last positive character trait is responsible. Responsible is to complete your duties and obligations to the best of your ability, to be accountable. For example, you arrived at work on time every morning and you remember to clock in. Ask if everyone understands what it means to clock in. I know that sounds like a crazy question to ask, but a lot of people don't understand. Hey, I got here, I'm supposed to be here at 8 o'clock, I'm here. But you got here at 8:05. I'm going to take my break, I'll see you later. And an hour and 5 minutes just passed. Okay, so now you've already got 5 minutes, that's 10 minutes. And it's time to go home. I'm leaving, you don't clock out. Well, what time did you leave? I leave at 5. But you really left at 4:55. Now you've got 15 minutes that you stole from the company. If we can get people to understand the importance of being responsible as far as their time alone goes, never mind taking a pencil or a pen or something like that, if we can teach people to be responsible for the things that they have control of, that helps the company as well. So that's one of the greatest things that you can do for the character trait of responsible. Now let's continue on page 14. How many of these positive character traits did you recognize in yourself? One of the things as a teacher in training that you can do to get your students to understand is to learn to recognize these things in themselves, both the positive and the not so positive, the negative traits. So when you're at home quiet, go back and look at the positive character traits and the definitions that we just went through and see how many of them you see in yourself. See the ones that are lacking in you. How many of these positive character traits do you recognize in yourself? When you possess these traits, you can feel positive about yourself and your ability to interact with others in a meaningful and caring way. It's like manna. When people around you exhibit the same positive traits and treat you accordingly, you feel appreciated and respected. By simply interacting and communicating using these positive character traits, we can avoid hurting and devaluing others. Now, if we all sit and take a look at different days that we've had in the workplace, we can actually begin to see where we as teachers have fallen short, where we as managers have fallen short, and what could we do to turn it around. That's what the Peaceful Solution is trying to get us to do, to try to help others feel appreciated and respected. The opposite is when there are threats made in the workplace, and those threats can be, I'm gonna put somebody else in your position. I've heard that time and time again. Housekeepers are a dime a dozen. I can find anybody to come in and do the job. That's not going to create a positive work environment. We need to create an environment that brings productivity, but that kind of environment kills productivity. It's okay for this. One of the things to stress as teachers is it's okay to point out when there is hurt or harm. It's okay to point out when things are being done incorrectly. But it depends on how it's pointed out. And that's the one thing that we have to remember. Continuing on, if you find that you are lacking in any of these positive character traits, choose to set a goal to develop them. And that's really something that you can keep driving home. Like one of the character traits that I have a hard time with is patience. I have a hard time with being patient. If there's a job that needs to be done, and I found myself when I was working out at my old job, trying to explain something to somebody over and over and over again. And I finally would reach the point where I would find myself going to grab for it and pulling my hands back. And I'd go to grab for it and I'd pull my hands back. Because how are they going to learn if I do it? How are they going to learn if I do it every single time? Because it's so much easier. So we have to really be honest with ourselves when we're looking at these traits. And as teachers, it's important for you to get that, to have your students connect with that too, to really be honest with themselves, because the program will only help if we can truly be honest. If you find that you're lacking any of these positive character traits, choose to set a goal to develop them. You can develop a character trait by evaluating why it is important to you and how it can be beneficial to yourself and others. Put forth effort into showing appreciation towards others. Now that's one thing as teachers in training you can really start to drive home, is showing appreciation towards others. One of the things that I'm seeing now is that appreciation. Because where I retired from, there really wasn't that appreciation. It was something that was owed. But the supervisor that I have hasn't ceased in saying how much they appreciate the effort that I put forth. And you don't know how far that goes with a person when they're trying to learn a job that they don't know, or when they're trying to help in areas that are new to them. So the only thing I can do is encourage you when you're teaching the class to really stress how far appreciation does go. We can choose our words carefully when we're doing this. Challenge everyone, and I challenge every single one of you right now to show respect to everyone they meet for one day. To show respect to every person that you meet for one day. I know y'all can do it. Okay, continuing on. Steps to help you develop positive character traits. Number 1, consider why you want to obtain a certain positive trait. Well, for me to develop patience would mean that it's important because you train people better when you're patient with them. You help people reach the point that they have to if you can have that patience. So there's a value in the character trait of patience. So look at what you want to change in your life, and as teachers, get your students to see what they want to change in their lives. 2, list all the ways achieving that positive character trait will improve the life. And one of the things that if I were to achieve patience all the time, it would make a difference in the lives of those that I work with. And I wouldn't stress out so bad because I'm stressing because it's not being done the way I want it. Okay? I can be pretty black and white. And if my supervisor tells me, you need to clock in at this time, and you need to clock out for your break, and you need to clock back in at this time, and you need to clock out at this time, that's what I'm going to do because that's how black and white I am. I might not understand why that is important, but it is. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking that of me. It's the same thing for every single rule. But you might have to explain it in 20 different ways before it finally connects with the person that's having difficulty with it. And number 3, evaluate all the ways achieving that positive trait will greatly improve the lives of your coworkers, families, and friends. What benefit do we see with the trait that we're trying to develop within ourselves? What benefit do we as teachers serve when we try to get our students to see how these positive character traits will benefit them? Remember, this is probably one of the first times they've ever heard about character. So it's really important to help them to understand what character and character traits mean. Below this, it gives us, for example, let's say you want to develop the character trait of being thankful. The first step is to consider why you should be thankful. Next, list all the things you have to be thankful for, such as food, clothing, your family, a job, your health, and so forth. Often these things are taken for granted, and we don't want to be thankful for them. Or often they're just there, and we haven't remembered how to be thankful for them. These are the things that we can help when we're teaching our students, because a lot of times you don't see the full picture, and we have to see the full picture in order to bring about that peace within the workplace. Often these things are taken for granted, and we forget to be thankful for them. Make another list of how being thankful can affect people, the people you interact with every day. Well, I'm going to weigh the side that I gave for my own personal experience. When I was working at the job that I worked at for 20 plus years, I could see where the lack of appreciation was, and the only time it came was when it was going to be a benefit to a certain person. But it's like you didn't even exist except when there was a benefit. And then I go over here and I'm thinking I'm doing a really, really bad job. And yet the supervisor's saying, thank you, I really am glad you're here. There's a difference. So we have to remember these things. And the more you can use true life experiences, the more you're going to be able to connect with your students as you're teaching it. For example, a thankful person appreciates and takes care of their belongings and treats others with respect. You can use these same steps to develop any character trait that you're lacking. And you can develop any positive character trait, and you can fine-tune any positive character trait, but you have to set your mind to be able to do that. So continuing on, we're going to skip page 15, and let's see how much time. Okay. And we're going to go on to page 16. Now, everyone has both positive and negative character traits within their character. And as we're going through the negative character traits, I really want to encourage you to really look at what those negative character traits are. Because if anybody comes up to you and says, I don't have any negative character traits, oh yeah, there's the first one, they don't tell the truth. So keep these things in mind. We all have things that we can improve. We all have things that we can grow from. We all have things that need help. So encourage, as teachers, encourage the students to connect with these traits and be honest with themselves, because that's when the program is going to help them the most. Most people, when they come into the workplace, they put on that show. Okay, this is my professional side. And then when they leave, then you have their personal side. But if they're going through a crisis on the personal side, you're going to see a side of that character that you haven't seen yet, because eventually it bleeds over into it. So let's look at the next section. It's called Negate the Negative. Although it might be difficult to admit we have some negative traits, changing them begins with being honest with ourselves. And remember that a lot of the students haven't had the full course in character education, but use the things that you have been taught to enhance your class. And one of those things is in the responsibility unit on pages 14 and 15, we learned about A is for accountability. And we have to remember where it states in there that changing begins with being honest with ourselves. So take what you've learned to better enhance your class when you're teaching it to the different workplaces. Become familiar with these words that describe negative character traits and strive to keep them out of your character. So the first negative character trait is uneducated, making decisions without getting all the facts. Now, that's a big one in the workplace, because you can have a boss that says everybody's empowered to make decisions, but if they're not taught how to get all the facts, that decision can totally blow apart because they don't know. Earlier, the first teacher mentioned OSHA, which is the government agency that has regulations to make sure things are right in the workplace. No business wants OSHA involved in what they do, because OSHA will come in and they will scrutinize every every single bit of your comings and goings as a business. And the only reason that I know that is because I had to research an OSHA investigation that took place where I used to work because of a disgruntled team member. And the things that you have to look at, the rules, the regulations, and then they come back and make sure you're still doing it. And they come back and they come back. And then they start talking to the friends of this person. Well, this person's already cued the friends and saying, yeah, say this, say this. So you have to really be on your money and you have to be educated. But if you're uneducated, you're making decisions without getting all the facts. For example, Mary found the supply closet unlocked and decided to lock it without checking with the supervisor. She later found out repairmen were coming and the closet was left unlocked for a purpose. You can never fall short if you ask before you do. And that's something you can really, really stress with the students as you're teaching them. Ask before you do. Her supervisor then had to go back and unlock it for a second time for the repairmen. Well, let's think about what that did. The supervisor had to stop doing what she was doing, so it took away from what she was already supposed to be getting done. The repairmen that scheduled it into their work had to wait till the supervisor came to unlock that closet. And if she couldn't stop right then and there where she was, or if she was out having lunch and had to come back from lunch just to unlock the closet, think of all the time that's involved in those things. So it's always best to ask before you do. The next negative character trait is disrespectful, lacking courtesy, esteem, or honor. For example, Don was very polite to his supervisor, but very unkind to other workers. Everybody knows how to act when the manager's standing in front of them. But if the manager's not there, well, that's when you're going to have the chattering and the laughter and the sloughing off of your jobs and everything. That's when you're going to have the bad-mouthing of the fellow team members, and you're going to have the gossip flowing and things like this. That's a disrespectful character trait. And one of the things as teachers that we can do is give the students the courage and the strength to be able to actually turn it around. Should you be saying this? Should you be doing this? Is that what you really mean? I know this person and this person's upstanding. You have to learn to take the negative and turn it around. You can't throw gasoline onto it because all that's going to do is make that fire grow. And that's what we do when we have that back and forth and everything. The fire grows. And we're going to stop there. So make a little notch in your books that the next one is impatient, which is me. So it's been a pleasure to teach you this past month. And I look forward to hearing our next teachers as they bring forth this great knowledge that we're gaining from this class.